Good afternoon, everyone. We have one more member that will be coming in here, but I think we're going to get started anyway, since it's Friday afternoon. We are going to start with the Accountability and Implementation Board. Rachel Heiss can come to the table, and we have the analyst today is Laura Hyde. You can get started, Laura.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm Laura Hyde, presenting for the Accountability and Implementation Board. Starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary, AIB's fiscal 2026 budget decreases by $900,000 or 21% to $3.4 million. AIB is funded with special funds from the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund, which was created as part of Chapter 36 of 2021. Turning to page 3, Exhibit 1, this is the overview of the agency's spending. The total allowance, as I said, is $3.4 million, and the majority of that, $2.8 million, is on salaries and fringe benefits. There's also additional funds for miscellaneous services, office supplies, and other expenses. Turning to page 4, the proposed budget, Exhibit 2. So the fiscal 2026 allowance has a net decrease of $900,000 in Blueprint special funds compared to the fiscal 25 working appropriation. As you can see in Exhibit 2, expenditures increased by a net of $216,000 for personnel and $100,000 for routine operating expenses. These increases are offset by decreases of $1.1 million for technical assistance grants, which ended in fiscal 25, and $127,000 for consultants who assisted with the development of blueprint outcome measures and implementation plan review. Turning to page 5, personnel. The fiscal 26 budget provides AIB with 16 regular positions, and as of January 2025, AIC has filled 10 of those regular positions. This chart does not include, however, a governmental relations director who started in January. As of December 2024, AIB reported 5.75 more vacancies than would be needed to meet the fiscal 2026 budgeted turnover. In calendar 2025, AIB plans to hire 5 additional staff and expects to have a full complement of personnel headed into fiscal 2026. The bold language at the bottom of page 5 says that AIB should comment on the reasons for the high vacancy rate as of December 2024 and the reasons for hiring delays, particularly accountability director. Turning to pages 6 through 8, Exhibit 3, these are AIP reports and actions. If you can see, there's a required report on the left-hand side and a due date. So some of the required reporting that AIB keeps track of are local education agency comprehensive implementation plans, additional submissions for 2024 for career ladder, salary attestations, and career counseling, minimum school funding, AIB's comprehensive implementation plan, state agency comprehensive implementation plans, and the AIB annual report. You can see that these deadlines extend into calendar 2025. Some of the highlights of these issues, starting at the bottom of page 8, on the approval of LEA implementation plans. Under Chapter 36, as amended, LEAs must ensure minimum school funding, which means that at least 75% of the per pupil amount allocated to certain programs is distributed to schools where these students are enrolled. In May 2024, AIB and MSDE issued a joint policy statement regarding the minimum school funding provision and its implementation. LEAs were urged to meet the requirement no later than the 2026-2027 school year, consistent with the timeline that's on page 9. And as of January 2025, 23 out of 24 LEAs plans have met the criteria for fiscal 2025, and funds have been released. Continuing on page 9, AIB is working on state agency comprehensive implementation plans. They are participating in helping with the revision of teacher preparation requirements, and there's a new work group for that. Turning to page 10, AIB is offering targeted training on Blueprint. There was a grant awarded in July 2024, and AIB has been working with that vendor, and the first cohort started in January 2025. In the second paragraph for targeted training, you'll notice that in the 2025 session, a bill introduced HB 504 SB 439 of 2025, the Excellence in Maryland Public Schools Act, suggests a change to the statute for training for leaders and suggests that a school leadership program, a new one called the Maryland School Leadership Academy, be formed. In the 2026 budget as introduced, the Maryland School Leadership Academy receives $6.3 million provided through MSDE headquarters. There's also an independent evaluation of blueprint implementation that is due to the General Assembly in 2027, and AIB has just awarded that evaluation contract. And AIB is also working on technical assistance grants at the top of page 11 and additional LEA deliverables, including career ladder plans and career counseling plans. The bold language on page 12 says that AIB should comment on the reasons for delays in submissions of the agency's reports. However, they have submitted that report now. Status of the teacher preparation work group, LEA technical assistance grants, career counseling MOUs, the status of state agency implementation plans, and anticipated changes to blueprint leader training or funding if the bill that I mentioned is enacted. Turning to page 13, blueprint outcome measures. So one of the activities of AIB and MSDE is to develop outcome measures for blueprint. You can see at the top of the chart on page 13, they've adopted targets for the 2025-2026 year in literacy and mathematics and chronic absenteeism. There's measures adopted with targets in the 2026-2027 school year at the bottom of that page for workforce diversity, teachers of color, workforce retention, and then there's measures in progress, early childhood education, college and career readiness, career ladder, and student support personnel on page 14. So then turning to page 15, this is Exhibit 5. This is one of AIB's Managing for Results measure for Goal 1. So in fiscal 24, this is the first year of these data. 79% of LEAs increased the number of students enrolled in pre-kindergarten and apprenticeships available to high school students. 75% of LEAs increased the number of students with access to school-based health centers. 46% of LEAs increased the number of NBC teachers, nationally board certified teachers, and 10% of schools were visited by expert review teams. Out of the 5 reported measures, 4 met or surpassed the target in 2024. Then turning to the page 16, Exhibit 6, this is another MFR goal for AIB Blueprint support, which shows that AIB provided technical assistance sessions, public outreach sessions, a technical assistance to state agencies. The bold print at the bottom of page 16 says that AIB should discuss the reasons for setting LEA goals at 75% instead of 100% for measures of LEAs increasing the numbers of NBC teachers, students enrolled in pre-kindergarten and apprenticeships, and students with access to school-based health centers. On page 17, AIB has one recommended action for a report on blueprint implementation. This concludes my presentation, and I stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Excellent job as always.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions, so go ahead.
Okay.
Welcome.
Well, yes, Senator King, I'm Britt Kerwin, and I want to, Rachel Heiss, our executive director, and I want to thank you and Senator Benson and Senator Corderman for this opportunity to come and talk about progress with the blueprint and to respond to the questions that the analyst has raised. And we do want to say at the outset we're fully supportive of the governor's 2026 allowance for AIB. And we want to thank the analyst Laura Hyde for doing such an excellent job of in her analysis and making it so clear about the things that we need to respond to today. So we're in the 3rd year of the implementation of this remarkable legislation that the General Assembly passed, and we are already seeing, this is a 10-year implementation, but here in the 3rd year, we're already seeing the positive impact of this historic legislation. We've seen a almost 60% increase in full-day preschool participants since the start of the blueprint And, you know, when you think about that, what that means is we're going to see thousands of more kids coming to kindergarten ready to learn. And that's going to help get these kids on track, and we'll be able to keep them on track to meet our college and career-ready standards. That there's a teaching credential called National Board Certification. It's a very rigorous national credential, and it has been proven that teachers that have National Board Certification improve student outcomes in their classroom. And because of the incentives in the blueprint, I want to tell you a remarkable number. You know, Maryland is a modest-sized state, but last year we had more teachers achieve National Board Certification than any state. Not the highest percentage, the most number of teachers achieve National Board Certification of any state in the country, and the second most have National Board Certification for teachers of color.
Can I just add something right there?
Yes.
One thing that we as legislators have a problem with is we meet constituents out on the street, and they're
Right.
saying, well, how do you know it's working?
Right.
They want to see a piece of paper that says, you know, what it's accomplishing.
Right.
If I could have some of those things.
Absolutely.
If we could have that to put out in a newsletter to let people know that we are doing some
Absolutely.
good things, it would be very helpful.
Right. And Senator King, we would definitely get that data to you. We are upgrading our website, which is going to include a lot of this positive material. And also, MSDE has an excellent website that cites some of this progress. But let me just mention a couple of other facts that should make us all feel good. The AIB and MSD have focused on literacy and improving literacy in our schools, particularly in the early years. I think we all understand if you aren't competent and at standard with literacy, you really can't learn. So literacy is the right thing to focus on initially. And what we have done, there is a method for teaching literacy called the science of reading, which is phonics based. And there's been a kind of a literacy war in the country going on between the science of reading and something called whole language. And there's just overwhelming data showing that the science of reading is the preferred strategy for literacy. And so working with MSDE, we now have science of reading being taught in all of our LEAs across the state. And these efforts are, we've already seen the benefit of them. In the recent NAEP scores, the National Assessment of Education Progress, this is the national exam that's given to representative samples of 4th and 8th graders across the country, same exam, so we can compare ourselves to other states. Sadly, in the last NAEP exam, believe it or not, Maryland ranked 40th in 4th grade reading achievement, 40th out of 50 states. With this focus on literacy and this use of the science of reading now embedded in our schools, in the most recent exam, we jumped from 40th to 20th. There is a wonderful example of the progress that we're making with the blueprint. We've seen a very large increase in dually enrolled students. It's a very popular program that the blueprint created. Roughly 10%, approaching 10% of our 11th and 12th graders are now duly enrolled. And we're actually having high school graduates that end up with 2 degrees, a community college degree and a high school degree at the same time, which is very exciting. You put a lot of emphasis on career and technical education in the blueprint, and we've seen since the start of the blueprint, a 700% increase in students participating in the apprenticeship Maryland. We now have over 600 schools that are deemed community schools. These are schools that focus on in districts where there's a high concentration of poverty, and they get extra resources to address the needs of those children. And this model is working. Here's something that almost gives me goosebumps to think about. In the last state assessment, the highest concentration of poverty, students in the highest concentration of poverty showed the largest gains in language arts proficiency, which is, I think, dramatic example of what the community schools are working. Now, you know, it's not all a bed of roses. We have challenges. There are issues that need attention and addressing. For example, we need to significantly increase the number of private preschool providers. This has been a challenge for us, and I think we've all heard a good bit about this. We have to address the very significant shortfall in certified teachers. We don't have nearly enough, and I'll say just a bit more about that in a moment. We need to implement a more effective career counseling model. We changed that model in the blueprint, and we've still got work to do on that. And we need to work on creating college and career pathways that are better aligned with the state's workforce needs. But these issues, AIB and MSD, are going to work together to resolve in the coming year. And let me I just want to emphasize, because it really should give us all great confidence that this effort is going to work. The working relationship between AIB and MSD could not be better. The AIB staff and the MSD are in constant communication. The state board and the AIB board meet together on a regular basis. Now, you know, we don't always see eye to eye on every issue, as you would expect. But because there is such mutual trust and respect, we can always work out any differences in a very collegial way. So
I think we have the best teams as far as people working together, expert people, that we've had since I've been involved here in the legislature with education. I mean, from MSD to AIB, right. I mean, all of it. I think we've got the right people, and I just think it makes a huge difference.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, Senator King, because I was just going to say how blessed we are to have Superintendent Wright and my colleague on the right, Rachel Heiss, as the leader of MSDE and AIB. I'm telling you, if we went to Hollywood and asked them to script the perfect leaders for these two entities, they couldn't have done as well as what we've ended up with. So it is a blessing. I'm a bit into my remarks, but I did want to make one more point before I do. And one of the responsibilities, in addition to oversight and accountability, the AIB is expected to come to the legislature with any changes that we think need to be made. Now, we don't do that easily. The AIB is absolutely determined we will not come to the legislature unless we have very hard, fact-based evidence to suggest the change. This is not going to be done on a whim or because somebody's complaining. It's because we have evidence that the change needs to occur. And this last month, we came across evidence that we took action on, and that is, namely, next year would have been one of the year that we started the so-called collaboration time with teachers. Now, collaboration time, what does that mean? That means that teachers spend a little less time in-class instruction and more time on professional development, curriculum development, working with small groups of students who need extra help. This is common practice in the best performing systems in the world. Well, the fact is, and MSDE brought us this data, we have a huge shortage in certified teachers. We're short some 6,000 right now. And then to fully implement the collaborative time, it's going to take 15,000 more teachers. So it would just not be appropriate for the legislature to allocate funds for something we cannot implement. The teachers aren't there to undertake this initiative. So we took action to recommend that there be a pause, not a cut, but a pause in the implementation of collaborative time until we can build the cohort of teachers we need to implement it well. And so I just want to make two comments about that. One is that it would be we would urge that any savings from this some portion of it be invested in building the number of teachers we need. So by supporting our teacher prep programs, we have a Grow Your Own program, funds to help recruit teachers from out of state. So we ought to use a portion of this saving to help build up the cadre of teachers. And I think we also have to be careful that this reduction in collaborative time doesn't have unintended consequences elsewhere in the blueprint. So in conclusion, I remain very bullish about the blueprint. I've been with it since 2016. And to see it really coming to fruition and to see the progress that we're making is just so rewarding. And as excited as I am about where we are right now, I'm confident that when we come before you next year, there's even going to be more impressive examples to cite with you. So, Madam Chairman, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and let her respond to the analyst questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kerwin. So I will be brief, but I do want to just touch on what Ms. Hyde brought up. And the first item was on the hiring and vacancies. And I will just say, as a small state agency that is both trying to do the work and staff up, it is quite challenging. Recruitment is time consuming. And so we've been trying to balance and prioritize the efforts. And this year we prioritized filling the Outreach and Communications Director position, which we filled earlier in the fiscal year, at the beginning of the fiscal year. And Senator King, to your point, one of the first things that she did is she developed, it's a 2-pager, but back to front, of blueprint implementation highlights. And it is posted on our website, but as Dr. Kerwin pointed out, it's a little hard to find.
I just don't think the everyday Joe on the street goes to the website.
Right, I get it.
I mean, that's the problem. And they're looking to see something out there that is connected to the blueprint. I mean, for most people who aren't involved in education, blueprint is like this big word out there that is going to solve all the problems in education. And that's about all they know about it.
Yeah.
So somehow we have to put these bits out there often as to, like, just the things that Dr. Kerwin was just saying.
Yes.
So that people know we are getting results. These are the results we're getting, because I think that's the only way we're going to get support for the blueprint.
Absolutely. And so we will share what we have. We also are working on actually taking these highlights and creating a 1-pager for each county that, based on the same sort of data that points out what's actually happening in your counties. So we'll be sharing those with you as soon as possible.
Okay.
The LEA 1-pagers. The other work is complete, and we'll get that to you. And then the other position that we prioritized filling is the Government Relations Director, and we were able to we got very lucky, and I'm very thankful that Joyce Schaefer is our Government Relations Director. Joy's here, and you may remember her from the Kerwin Commission. So we are thrilled to have someone who is very knowledgeable about the blueprint and has lots of government relations experience. So Joy will be making the rounds. So
Okay.
And then on the accountability director position, we had to do some reclassifications for that position. We've done that now, and we're actually going to be filling that position internally very soon. And then the other positions that are vacant are policy analyst positions that we actually recruited for, one already, and hired who we were able to hire, and so we're going to go out and do another recruitment for those remaining policy analyst positions in the spring. The next items related to some of the reporting, and I will just very briefly on the annual report, as Laura noted, it has been submitted. It was delayed because of the legislative recommendations that are required part of the annual report, which were the board adopted in January. And so one thing we would request is if we could sort of separate the report from the legislative recommendations so that the timeline for the annual report is a different date than when the legislative recommendations are due, then that would, I think, help us to get the information into you sooner. On the technical assistance grants, we are in phase 2, and we've awarded $3.5 million in this fiscal year to all 24 school systems are participating, as well as the CTE committee. About the majority of the money is going to support LEAs in strategic budgeting and planning to meet the minimum school funding requirements, that 75% requirement. And so we have several financial experts that are working with the LEAs to support that work, as well as continuing to support the strategic facilitators. I think Ms. Hyde noted that all but one of the LEA comprehensive plans for this year have been fully approved. There's just one remaining that has conditional approval, and yes, it is. But I believe we are on track for full approval this month. They just needed to get signatures on their career ladder plan. And then all of the career counseling MOUs have now been fully approved. So we're making progress on the LEAs. For the state agencies, we are also making a lot of progress. We've approved the consortium for Coordinated Community Supports Plan in December, and we've been working with the other agencies, providing feedback, and they've been resubmitting pieces of their plans for approval. And so I think we're very close. The State Department of Education just very recently has resubmitted some pieces that we're reviewing. So I think we're very close for several of them to be able to recommend approval. There's no deadline in the statute for when they have to be approved. It's, when they're approvable. And then the Juvenile Services Education Program had a later date. Their plan was due in October. So they're going to be a little longer before we're able to bring them for approval. Ms. Hyde noted the legislation that modifies the Blueprint Leadership Training and creates a school leadership academy. I think the main differences between the current law and what has been proposed is to very explicitly expand the training beyond just principals to assistant principals, instructional coaches, and other school leaders. In talking with MSDE and AIB, in addition to the teacher shortage, we're seeing signs of an impending school leadership shortage. And so this is to sort of try to get out in front of that. And so not just train principals, but train the up and coming and aspiring principals. And then in terms of the funding, the training does add a mentoring component so that we would match basically the trainees with successful principals and school leaders. And that, I think, would have some additional cost. We'll wait and see what the fiscal note says. The other item I want to touch on is related to the outcome measures and MFR. And we did provide you with, in our testimony, a schedule for a timeline for when the additional aligned metrics, as we refer to them. These are outcome measures that AIB and MSDE both had in our plans, and we came together last year to align around what the measure should be and how we're defining it so that we're all measuring the same thing. And so that led to the targets that Ms. Hyde noted that were adopted last year. And then we have 7 additional metrics that will, as baseline data is available, the boards will be adopting targets. And so there's a schedule there, and there are a number of them that we hope to bring to both boards later this spring to set targets. And regarding the MFR goal, I think for the initial goal, the AIB wanted to set a feasible target. Now that we have some data that we can look at, I think the AIB will consider adjusting those goals because we want them to be feasible but also ambitious.
I have one question. Coming from a county that's always the overachiever, Montgomery County has already started paying their starting teachers. I think they're up to 65 now. And that now they're worried that there's such a difference between those that aren't implementing and where they are, and they just are worried about being able to still get the fair funding that everybody else is getting. So just wanted to mention that's on their radar.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And there are a number of LEAs, particularly in the Central Maryland region, that, prioritized reaching the 60,000 minimum salary requirement early. So in the statute, that's required by July 1 of 2026. But as you pointed out, Montgomery County, and there are several others that are above it and very close to it. I think, this is part of some of the challenge. The funding that is in the foundation, well, let me back up. There's money in the foundation to support going to 60,000 by the deadline. So for districts that have gotten there a little sooner, they've used money that potentially could have gone to other things to do that because they prioritize that. And I think in some cases, they were anticipating using the collaborative time funding to cover some of those costs. And so I think that's something that
Just keep it on
we
your
need to
radar
talk
screen.
about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And I have talked to some of the schools coming in on their budgets, but we've talked about finding, recruiting teachers. Everyone seems to be on board with working towards recruiting teachers, but we've got to find a way to make it, I think, somehow more attractive. And I don't know what the answer is, but we've got to find a way to make the job more attractive to people coming in, I think is the key.
Justin Robinson is a member of the AIB and also a teacher. And he has talked pretty passionately about that and really about, needing to actually change the culture in schools. Because students who we want to become teachers are seeing teachers in difficult circumstances
With no help.
and it's not helping.
Yeah.
So that's a hard, how we figure that out,
It's
I
hard,
think is
but
challenging, but
I think we can figure it out. We've
Yeah.
got to find a way to do it.
Senator King, could I add that obviously we want to grow our own. We want our teacher prep programs to produce more teachers.
But I don't think we can possibly grow all of our own.
We cannot. And what I wanted to say is that what we're doing in Maryland with the blueprint is that as the word gets out, no other state is doing anything like this. And we're going to look as a very attractive place. If you want to be a teacher, want to pursue a teaching career, where better to do it than Maryland. So I do think we're going to see the opportunity to recruit, increase our ability to recruit from out of state.
Okay. Any questions from the members? Senator Corderman?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just not to one-up you, but I believe Washington County was one of the first that had the teacher salary 60,000, and the pre-K, I think we did pre-K before the blueprint even came about. But that being said, though, going back to some of the things that you guys were talking about in regards to, and I appreciate, Rachel, you bringing up towards the end the chart here as far as the anticipated timelines to really kind of, and it goes back to the chair's question of how do we get the word out? What are the successes? What are we not being successful in? And what is the accountability in all of this, right? Obviously, the AIB accountability is a big part of that. And so I guess it's not really a question per se, other than is there an opportunity to move some of these things at a little faster clip of, as Dr. Corwin said, we're in year 3. Some of these things are 25, 26, 27. We'll be 5, 6 years into this till we really have an idea of how successful we were or we weren't. We talk about the NAEP scores. There's adaptive testing in there now, so it's debatable as far as is the child getting the exact same test as the child beside them. I guess I'm just trying to figure out a way of how are we going to be able to, in the future, or maybe not in the future now and going forward, of really come up with some sort of metrics that are really showing one way or another, is this actually working? And again, I know you've laid out here over these next couple of years, but I think the concern is how far are we going to be into this till we really know did it work or not, and did we just spend a whole lot of money and it didn't work? We're very appreciative, I think, we talked about some of the teacher salaries, things of that nature. I know in our district, at a middle school, it's probably a community school or tier 1 school. I don't know the terminology, but long story short, I have a third-year teacher who's making close to $70,000 to $80,000 a year, which is great. But is that generating the success and the outcome of the student that we want to have? We don't know. And so we're just really trying to figure out those metrics and how can we hone in on that to make sure this is actually being successful as everyone is saying it's going to be.
Absolutely. So I would just point out that on page 13 of the analysis are the indicators that we have already set targets for and that the LEAs are working towards. And these first targets were set for literacy and math in grades 3 through 8, as well as chronic absenteeism and workforce diversity and retention. So those were the first metrics that targets were set for, partly because those are very high priorities to show whether we are making progress. If we've got, the mathematician here says if you can't read, you can't do math. So literacy was the highest priority in terms of making sure we're setting ambitious targets, but our math scores are actually not as good as our literacy scores. And so, if you can't read and you can't do math, you're not going to be college and career ready by 10th grade. And so we did focus on setting targets for these metrics first. We will set targets as soon as we can. The challenge is having baseline data, but it is also possible to set targets without baseline data. So we can certainly I hear what you're saying, and we can certainly consider if there's a way to move up the timeline. I also just wanted to point out the interim evaluation that's required by statute. As Ms. Hyde noted, the AIB just at its last meeting awarded that contract to, it's called NORC at the University of Chicago. They do have a presence in Maryland, in Bethesda, I believe. And they will be coming on board this month to begin the work plan for that interim evaluation, which is all about looking at whether we're making progress and whether there should be changes to the blueprint based on what is working and what isn't working. So that's going to take a year and a half. So the final interim evaluation will be done in December of 2026. But we will be hearing from them along the way and have opportunities for them to also brief legislators and the public and the board around what they're finding, so that we're not waiting until December of 26 to announce what we're finding. We're going to reveal that along the way.
No? Okay.
Great.
That was easy.
Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay.
Okay, next we will move to the MSDE headquarters. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
This is Maryland State Department of Education headquarters budget. And so thank you.
Nope, it's gone.
Okay, MSD headquarters budget. We're starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary. So this shows that the fiscal 2026 budget for MSD headquarters increases by $14.9 million, or 4%, to $388.1 million. Then turning to page 5, this is Exhibit 1. This is under Managing for Results. So this exhibit shows MSD's Managing for Results measure for retention of teachers of color, which is one of the blueprint measures approved by AIB, the State Board of Education, and has a retention goal of 75%. This graph shows that from school year 2023 to school year 2024, Maryland's retentions of teachers of color decreased slightly, but MSD projects retention to improve across all groups in fiscal 25 and 26, with the state potentially on track to meet AIB's and MSD's 75% retention goal for Asian and Hispanic Latino teachers by school year 2025-26. The bold language on page 6 asked MSD to comment on how the department is working to update this MFR to include the recently adopted goals for this measure, and how MSD is taking steps to help LEAs meet its estimated targets, and then a question about whether MSD plans to measure retention of teachers of color who identify in additional race categories. Turning to page 7, Exhibit 2. This is for the Division of Rehabilitation Services. In fiscal 2024, the measures of individuals with disabilities that achieve an employment outcome totaled 1,009, which is an increase of 15 individuals from the 2023 year. And then the other measure, the target for individuals with disabilities who receive pre-employment transition services, also increased by 1,600 individuals, or 23%. If you look on the bottom of page 7, the bold language asks MSD to comment on efforts to reach the target to assist 1,371 people with disabilities to obtain competitive integrated employment in fiscal 2025. Turning to page 8, this is a discussion of MFR measure that's been discontinued for teacher effectiveness and career technical education data that was on a dashboard by MSDE. If you look in the middle of page 8, the bold language here asks MSDE to comment on the reasons for the phase out of the CTE dashboard, and also to comment on whether the department is continuing the teacher evaluation data and the status of new measures that the department might have for teacher quality and effectiveness. Turning to page 11, this is Exhibit 3. This is the overview of agency spending. This just shows that the agency's allowance in fiscal 2026 is mainly allocated for the Division of Rehabilitation Services, the Office of the State Superintendent, Deputy for Teaching and Learning, Deputy for Organizational Effectiveness, and then Operations and School Safety Grants. Turning to page 13, this is the proposed budget. And so a notable change in this budget involves $8.3 million in Blueprint special funds to MSD headquarters for new programs and expenses. Funds allocated for Blueprint Training for Leaders, which is a mandated program that the AIB was just discussing in Chapter 36, received $3 million in fiscal 25. In the fiscal 2026 budget as introduced, this $3 million in Blueprint funds for that program is replaced by an allowance of $6.3 million for the Maryland School Leadership Academy, which is part of the Governor's Blueprint initiatives introduced in SB 429, HB 504. There's also $2 million for teacher recruitment activities and $3 million for administrative costs in this budget. And so the bold language that is on page 15 says that because Blueprint Training for Leaders in January 2025 has just started, DLS recommends reducing the fiscal 2026 allowance by $3.2 million to level fund that program. And then also DLS asks that MSD explain why $3 million is needed for administrative costs relating to the existing CPG program. So turning to page 16, this is about personnel. So from fiscal 2025 to 2026, headquarters gains a total of 37 positions and 1 contractual full-time equivalent. New positions include positions in the Office of the State Superintendent, Office of Teaching and Learning, Office of the Deputy of Organizational Effectiveness, and then positions indoors added by the Board of Public Works in July 2024. Maryland Center for School Safety also gains 1 new position. The bold language, which is on page 17, asks MSD to comment on agency efforts to reduce vacancy rates, and then considering the high number of long-term vacant positions, DLS recommends reducing MSD's personnel expenditures by a certain amount to delete 5 of the 35 new positions in the fiscal 2026 budget as introduced. Turning to page 18, Exhibit 5. This shows state education agency fund distribution. So of this amount, the state education agency funds were distributed in fiscal 20, 21, and 22 as part of the emergency elementary and secondary emergency relief funds. So what this shows is of this amount, MSD designated approximately $174 million or 57% for Maryland Leads, which is a set of 7 programs designed to address learning loss, and $59.9 million for other learning loss, and $51 million approximately for discretionary programs, $14.7 million for state emergency needs, and $3.5 million for administration. So some of these, and I'm going to go to the next page, excuse me. So turning to page 20. It's just a lot going on here. Turning to page 20, Exhibit 6. This shows in fiscal 24, Maryland Leads expenditures totaled $158.6 million, out of which they have spent so far almost 92 or 91% of that money. And then if you turn to page 21, you can actually see the Leads expenditures by LEA in Exhibit 7. So turning to page 23. This is Exhibit 8. This is actually showing the state education agency programs and funding, and this shows as of January 2024, MSDE reported that out of $303 million in SEA funding, $274.3 million, or 91% approximately, has been expended. You can see that on the top of page 24, there's bold language, which asks MSD to comment on the status of Maryland Leads expenditures, outcome measures, and SEA funding discrepancies, and DLS recommends committee narrative requesting that MSD continue to report on this funding. The second issue starts on page 25. This is Exhibit 9, and this is talking about literacy policy implementation. This shows a proposed timeline for the implementation of the new literacy policy, Science of Reading, and its components. MSDE's draft literacy policy is the most recent step by the department to implement Chapter 512 of 2019, which MSDE calls the Ready to Read Act. Chapter 512 called for the adoption of evidence-based literacy instruction, screening to identify at-risk students for reading difficulties, and supplemental instructional services to help students achieve reading proficiency by grade 3. In October 2024, MSD introduced the most recent version of the draft literacy policy to the State Board of Education, and once the draft plan is approved, MSD plans to implement these components by school year 2027-2028. The bold language, which is on page 26, asks MSD to comment on the status of the new literacy policy, Maryland Leads Science of Reading expenditures, and plans to expend federal and nonprofit grants for this purpose. And DLS also recommends adopting committee narrative for a joint status report on Science of Reading from MSD and AIB and other purposes. Turning to page 27, this is Exhibit 10. This is for the Maryland Center for School Safety. So this exhibit shows that from fiscal 2024 to 26, a total of $66.8 million has been allocated in the MCSS budget for school safety grants, programs, and evaluations. This includes $26 million in general funds and $40 million in Safe Schools Fund special funds. This amount does not include $10 million for the School Safety Grant Program, which is allocated in the Interagency Commission on School Construction budget. In fiscal 2026, a total of $21.6 million for school safety programs includes $8 million in general funds and $13.6 million in school safety funds distributed, including $10 million for the SRO grant and $3 million for the hate crimes grant, and also $3 million for the school mapping grant. So turning to page 28, this is Exhibit 11. This shows the Safe Schools Fund balance. So due to a $19.1 million fund balance at the close out of fiscal 22 and underspending on SRO grants in fiscal 2023 and 2024, the estimated Safe Schools Fund balance at the end of fiscal 2025 totals $18.8 million. There's a negative deficiency in fiscal 25, which withdraws $5 million, and another $5 million contingent reduction in the fiscal 2026 budget for the SRO grant. So the estimated fund balance at the end of fiscal 2026 totals $10.8 million. This analysis indicates that the remaining Safe Schools Fund balance could be used to replace $5 million in general funds for the SRO grant, with the remaining balance of $5.8 million. On page 29, there's bold language that asks the Maryland Center for School Safety to comment on the reasons for underspending the SRO program in fiscal 23 and 24, and reasons for the growing Safe Schools Fund balance. The recommended actions for Maryland Department of Education start on page 30, and then on page 32, there are MFR measures for the Maryland Center for School Safety and for the Maryland Longitudinal Data Systems Center. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Good job. Madam Superintendent, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for being, I'm happy to be here. Madam Chair, I am, as you know, Carrie Wright, State Superintendent of Schools, and with me today is Christian Chalor, who's the Deputy State Superintendent for Operations and Finance, and Donna Gunning, who's the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Finance. And I just want to say thank you, and thank you for your commitment to education, and also a big hats off to our analyst, who always does an amazing job, and thanks for working so hard with us on this. Before we respond to the analysis, I'd like to share an update on how the department under my leadership is improving education for all children in the state. Since we met this time last year, the department, with the guidance from the State Board of Education and in collaboration with the Accountability and Implementation Board, has been extremely busy implementing policies designed to ensure all students are able to graduate high school, college, and career ready. And here are some highlights. As I shared with you last year, the Maryland State Board of Ed adopted a resolution to have Maryland among the top 10 in the nation in reading and math on the nation's report card by 2027. In 2013, Maryland was among the top 2 highest performing states. By 2022, Maryland's rank had fallen to 40th. We have significant investments in the science of reading and math through strategic philanthropic partnerships. Last spring, I finalized a partnership with the IBIS Group and SUNY, the State University of New York, to offer a micro-credentialing program in the science of reading that provides high-quality professional learning. Over 5,000 teachers and administrators have participated to date. Last spring, I also finalized a partnership with Arnold Ventures to bring math tutoring to middle schoolers and to provide professional development to teachers. These investments, along with the hard work of teachers and leaders across the state, are starting to show results. The 2024 NAEP results for 4th and 8th grade Maryland show real progress in reading and modest progress in math. 4th grade reading scores are now 20th in the nation, up from 40th in 2022. But the work continues. In February 2024, MSDE announced the formation of a task force to examine the state's assessment and accountability systems to strengthen the connection between school ratings and student achievement. Facilitated by the National Center for the Improvement of Educational Assessment, more commonly known as the Center for Assessment, the task force guiding priorities for this work included improving outcomes for all students, measuring what is important for improving student outcomes, using accountability to drive behavior, transparency in monitoring and reporting, and achieving the blueprint for Maryland's call for all students to be college and career ready by the end of grade 10. The members of this task force included state and local K-12 and higher education leaders, teachers, and PTA members. The task force presented their final report with recommendations and implementation guidelines to the State Board in December. Some of the recommendations included adopting an appropriate student growth measure in a manner that best supports prioritized criteria, establishing common performance levels, using a very deliberative process with experts and key constituents to overhaul the assessment system, and educating the community on how to understand assessment and student progress. I also quickly reestablished a technical advisory committee. That's a committee that is used in each state to advise state agencies on the oversight of assessment and accountability measures, to provide guidance to us in designing a new assessment, and also to make sure that what we were doing in terms of evaluating our accountability model were done under national expert eyes. The assessment office has crafted an RFP for a brand new assessment system with an intent to award the new contract in July of 25. In October of 24, the State Board of Ed adopted a comprehensive pre-K through grade 3 literacy policy after a rigorous review and stakeholder feedback. We had over 8,000 pieces of feedback on our literacy policy. In January 2025, MSDE shared an overview of the mathematics policy with the State Board. The goal of this policy is to give all children, including pre-K students, a chance to hone their problem-solving skills, to develop deep understanding, and to utilize their inborn ability to think mathematically. Because in reality, all kids are math kids. The policy will be submitted to the State Board Policy Committee for review and a 30-day comment period in February and in March, along with a comprehensive stakeholder feedback engagement in the spring and fall of 2025. MSDE, in conjunction with AIB, has been working on school leadership training. Between January 16th and 19th, we brought together over 900 school-based leaders, 5 different locations across the state. We discussed research-based instruction, staff retention, deconstructing standards, how to use assessments, and how to ensure instructional coherence. This work will continue over the next few months. We are also in the process of revising all of our content standards. I want to let you know the reasons why is because of how long ago it's been since we've really looked at these standards. In math, the last time we revised those was 2011. Literacy was in 2012. The arts were in 2016. Health and PE 2021, social studies in 2018, and science in 2013. The first phase of the literacy standards and framework, as well as the math standards, will be presented to the board in May. Health, ed, and PE will be recommended to the State Board in June. Social studies standards will be released for public comments in February with adoption in March. And this work reflects our commitment to equity, standards, and outcomes for all students in Maryland. I hope this helps you see how committed we all are to ensure that our students can be successful. Now I'm going to turn it over to Christian Chaleur and Donna Gunning to share the department's response to the analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Krishna Tulur. I'd like to start off by thanking Laura Hyde for her thoughtful and thorough analysis of our department's headquarter budget and a collaboration and work that we are able to do together. Our response includes both Maryland Center for School Safety and Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center. Representatives from both centers are here today in the event you have questions about their budgets. Detailed responses to the items requiring MSDE comments have been submitted. I will now share some of the highlights of department's response. MSDE was asked to comment on several MFR metrics. First, for teachers of color, the department's fiscal 2026 MFR includes the AIB's recently adopted goals for teacher retention of all teachers and teachers of color. Department has supported LEAs through the work of the P20 Collaborative Recruitment and Retention Committee, the current leadership training program, the new School Leadership Academy, and the Maryland Educator Workforce Dashboard. Finally, all race and ethnicity groups are included in the teacher retention rate measures. Next, the efforts DOORS is taking to reach the goal of assisting 1,371 individuals with disabilities to obtain competitive and integrated employment are detailed in our response document. The steps include expanding outreach, enhancing training and employment opportunities, support, and streamlining the intake process. The CTE dashboard is being phased out in favor of a more comprehensive and user-centered approach for data reporting. Additional details on the data reported are available in our response document. Finally, MSDE continues to collect teacher evaluation data from local education agencies. There are no new measures of teacher quality and effectiveness. Next, the analysis identified encumbrances indoors. These are associated with medical case services. The funds are obligated when authorization is granted. Expenditures are recorded when the service is rendered. The door staff does review the open encumbrances periodically throughout the year. Proposed budget changes. MSDE respectfully disagrees with the recommendation to reduce the allowance by $3.2 million in Blueprint special funds. These funds are necessary to support the re-envisioned approach to training for school leaders and system leaders. As you heard from Dr. Kerwin and Dr. Wright, the Academy will focus on developing school leaders, focusing on school leaders of colors and those that serve high-poverty schools and low-performing schools. These funds are necessary to grow a pipeline of highly trained, effective school leaders. Regarding personnel data, MSDE has made significant progress in reducing vacancies. Agency had a vacancy rate of nearly 19% in January of 2023, and we are now at less than 7%. And part of the vacancies are in Division of Rehabilitation Services, and some of them are within the Disability Determination Services Unit that operates based on the Social Security Administration and federal guidelines. And vacancies in those areas can be impacted if there is a federal funding situation like the continuing resolutions and things of that nature that happened over the years. MSDE respectfully disagrees with the recommendation to delete 5 pins. The department received 18 positions to support the comprehensive literacy and math initiatives, community schools, and early learning. A reduction will significantly impact department's effort to support teachers, classroom students, and schools and communities. Regarding the literacy policy, Dr. Wright has provided an update on the status of various activities that are being taken. The Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant was awarded in September of 2024. MSDE will receive about $40.3 million over 5 years, with 95% is subgranted to local education agencies. Agencies' plan in spending the federal and nonprofit dollars are detailed in our response. Finally, regarding the operating budget recommended actions, for the reasons previously stated, MSDE respectfully disagrees with the request to eliminate 5 pins. MSDE concurs with the request for reports, accounting practices, science of reading and literacy policy, and state education stimulus funds, with the request to change the timeline for the report on Maryland leads. Finally, MSDE also respectfully disagrees with the recommendations to reduce the Blueprint special funds for local leadership, School Leadership Academy and Concentration of Poverty grants. The funding for the Concentration of Poverty program is critical to providing more than 700 community schools the evidence-based support and hands-on technical assistance that they have been expecting. With that, we are happy to answer your questions.
Well, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Not hard ones, not hard
Okay.
ones.
I'm sorry. One of the problems that we are having in Prince George's County is the education and resources for students who are disabled. Can you all comment on what you're doing in the way of ensuring that, first of all, the people who work with the students are qualified? And number 2 is this whole issue of students who are disabled continues to come up on the radar screen. How are you all dealing with those students who are disabled?
Thank you for asking that question. We've actually reached out, the director for special ed that works at MSDE has reached out directly to work with the department in Prince George's County because we too are hearing complaints and issues that are arising in the schools. So we are working directly with them to resolve those issues. I think also we have to take a look at, right now we know, and I can't give it to you by subject area, but right now we are well over 6,000 conditionally certified teachers. And so that's huge. That has dramatically increased over the years. And we also know that special education is an area that is hard to fill. So we know that we have to work with those folks as well to get them certified. So I can't give you the exact numbers off the top of my head today. I can certainly get that information to you, but know that our office is working directly with Prince George's County on this.
Thank you very much.
Senator Corbin, go ahead.
Go.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to follow up, and I missed it, I apologize. I wanted to follow up on the SRO program. The DLS analyst pointed out some reasons for underspending the SRO program in fiscal 23 and 24, and asked for a response, and I didn't hear anything about that and didn't see anything in your written response. And so just trying to figure out how and why we're not getting the money out the door for that program.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator, for the question. I'm Kate Bryan. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for School Safety, and this is Gifty Quarshi. She's our Director of Administration. So your question is, so we did submit a response. It should be in your packet. It probably follows the MSDE response.
Probably why I missed. I was just
At the end, yep.
I apologize.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, we've had this conversation a few times over the last couple of years about underspending in the SRO grant. There is a couple of challenges. So the way the law is written for the grant, there is a provision to ensure that the funds are used in a way that does not supplant funding that is already obligated to that program. Additionally, we've heard from a few of our school systems the concern with not having enough personnel, right? Not having enough officers to be able to actually put on retainer to be able to put them into SRO positions. I will say we were very lucky last year to have your bill that passed, which expanded the use of the SRO funds to include school security employees. So we do anticipate this year and in future years that more of that funding will be expended.
Okay, good. That was kind of the lead, and I was curious as far
Sure.
as if we've seen any movement on that since that legislation changed last year as far as moving forward do you anticipate that not being the same issue we've been having, that to be able to draw down and actually get that money out to the schools and to the communities that's needed?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So for fiscal year 25, as things stand, we are at least $2 million more in terms of funds that have been encumbered already compared to just fiscal year 24.
Okay.
I believe fiscal year 24, we awarded about 6.2, and we are currently at approximately $8.9 million of the $10 million that was appropriated.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I apologize again. I was just looking at MSD's information, so thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
I just have a couple little questions that I've jotted down as I've been going through here. We've had some concern from parents and students about the dual enrollment program. I've talked to some of the people from College Park. What the students are telling me is they take a course in the high school, be it, what do you call, what's the magnet program? They can take it there, they can take the IB program, they even get a 5 on the IB exam, and then when they get to College Park or Towson, they're told they have to take those courses over because the college courses are more stringent than the high school courses. And so the conversation that we've been having is if this is going to work, we've got to be able to have courses that
You're exactly correct. And typically, and I can't speak I can't speak for USM, but nationally, if you score a 3, 4, or 5 on an advanced placement class, and I think it's either 4 or 5 on IB, if memory serves, those usually count for 3 automatic credits into secondary ed. So that is a surprise to me that they would be made to retake those classes.
Yeah, well,
But I don't-
what they're saying is that there are several courses, I don't have the names of all of them, but there are several courses that the students in the dual enrollment program take that are really just almost a training for going to college. When you get to the college course is a much more stringent program, and we just kind of think that it's got to be one course that works for everybody, I would think.
Senator King, we are hearing the same things and have, in collaboration with MSD and with higher education, we've established a dual enrollment work group that has began meeting in the fall.
Okay.
Initially, it was focused on, because most students are dual enrolling at community colleges, trying to, address some of the concerns and inconsistencies across the counties related to their interactions with the community colleges. And then as we're working our way through those, we're expanding it into more guidance around dual enrollment and making sure that there are pathways for the credits to transfer. And that if they're not going to transfer, that it's very clear to students and career counselors and school counselors that, we want to make sure that if students are expecting credits to transfer, that we're steering them towards the courses that are going to transfer.
Okay.
Part of the challenge there, and as you know, this has been an issue for a long time. But of course, as we have more and more students dual enrolling, it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue. Part of the challenge is that the credits might transfer, but they don't actually count towards the degree,
Right.
which is a problem.
Yeah.
There are ways to resolve that through this committee, because I think that's one thing that we need to take a look at, or what do we need to establish a common list, I'm going to call it, of acceptable dual enrollment, dual credit courses that we can verify, because Ms. Heiss is right. It's a shame that children then spend all that time and then don't end up having it account for something. So I think we need to be thinking about what is it that we can guarantee children and families that if you take this course, it will not only count for you, but will also transfer and count for credit.
Right. Well, and another thing too, I know that the high school counselors are up to their eyeballs in work, and so expecting them to counsel all these kids to what courses to take or not, and it is just not something that kids know.
That's right.
Offhand. So I just, in trying to make this dual enrollment thing work, I just think we have to address.
I totally agree.
issues like
I could not agree more.
Okay. Now switch to preschool.
Another habit.
I've had some people in my office just in the last week or so talking about private preschools and daycare centers. And it's kind of an awkward one for me, because years ago I was probably the one that had the bill in that made it a little harder to be qualified to be a preschool center, because we want our kids to be in the safest possible place that there is, and we've got to do the background checks, and we have to make sure that the people running these schools are what we want for our kids. But they're complaining that it takes too long to get certified to be a teacher and to have a preschool center. And I don't know where the medium is there, but I don't think I would want to see us relax any of the regulations that we have.
Did you want to come? No, you go. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think that what we're trying to do is trying to find a little bit more of a happier medium, if you will. For example, maybe somebody that years of service as opposed to necessarily a degree that might qualify for something like that. So we are examining other ways to get that done, but we do not want to back up on high quality. We do not want to, I'm in total agreement with you there. I think right now, if we're looking at a shortage, it's the time that we kind of look to see, are there other ways that we could do this to still guarantee high quality, but also make sure that we've got people in those classrooms that need to be there.
Okay. And the last thing, I kind of said this a little bit earlier, listening to everything that has been said today and looking at all that was in our presentation here, we're doing really good things.
Yeah.
The schools are doing great. And all we hear in the media is negative stuff. We're not hearing all the good things that are happening, and somehow we've got to be able to turn that around. Wish we had newspapers, old-fashioned newspapers, but there's got to be a way to put that out there that the blueprint is working, and we are not struggling as badly as everybody thinks that we are. We're not perfect, and we have a lot of things to fix, but
No doubt.
got to be able to advertise that a little bit, that we are doing really well.
I agree. I think we need, probably, I'm going to own it from our end too, a stronger communication strategy around this. We've been trying to push out a lot of stuff through social media, our press releases. We're thinking about trying to figure out is there a way that we could even do this at our board meetings on a monthly basis. So that's the one thing we've been trying to do, is to link up between the two of us, on even items that are on our agenda that are jointly shared with AIB to really keep pushing Blueprint out front, because we are bound and determined to make sure that it gets implemented with fidelity, and it is showing progress. And so we just need to double down on some things to make even more progress.
Sure. Well, I think you're doing great anyway.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
We have two witnesses here, I think, Rashida Jameson. And,
I'm actually here for the enough back. I must have clicked the wrong button.
okay, for the next one, okay. And how about Jamisa Ford Williams?
Good afternoon. My name is Jamesa Fawcett Williams. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and distinguished members of the Budget Committee. My name is Jamesa Fawcett Williams, and I proudly serve as a representative of Maryland State Department of Education. I'm a Doors Counselor in the Transition Office at Baltimore City, and I am also the president of Local 3644 ASME. I thank the committee for the opportunity to testify today in support of the governor's proposed budget and his commitment to rebuilding and strengthening Maryland's state government. We thank the governor for the ongoing efforts to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of state operations, particularly in addressing staffing shortages that have long hindered the delivery of essential services to Maryland's children and individuals with disabilities. We've witnessed notable progress in filling vacancies within our agency, and we are encouraged by this positive direction. These staffing challenges have profoundly impacted our ability to serve Maryland's most vulnerable residents, and the governor's proposed budget marks a critical first step in addressing these issues. However, much work remains to be done, particularly in the departments such as Disability Determination Services, Division of Rehabilitation Services, and Child Care Licensing, where staffing needs continue to pose a significant challenge. In order to meet these challenges, the state must find a way to raise revenue so agencies like mine have the resources we need to serve those who need it the most. In closing, we hope that the state continues to invest in its workforce, as this is essential for strengthening the services we provide to Maryland's residents. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to come over and testify. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, we will move now into the Governor's Office for Children.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Committee. My name is Madeline Miller, and today I'll be presenting the DLS budget analysis for the Governor's Office of Children, or for Children. This agency was reestablished last spring to promote the well-being of children and families and reduce the number of children living in poverty. In fiscal 2026, its budget increases by $35 million to $105.9 million, as shown on the cover sheet. However, I want to draw your attention to Exhibit 1 on page 2, which shows another picture of planned spending. This exhibit excludes the agency's special fund expenditure. In both fiscal 25 and 26, the agency's budget includes general funds to be contributed to the Engaging Neighborhoods, Organizations, Unions, Governments, and Households Grant Fund and the Special Fund Grant Expenditure. Flipping back to the cover sheet, the allowance includes approximately $75.8 million for enough grants, other non-personnel enough program expenditures, and enough capacity building grants to local management boards. Half of that, or $37.9 million, is the general fund appropriation, and half of that is special funds. Excluding the special fund expenditure, the fiscal 2026 allowance increases by $17.2 million to $68.1 million. Chapter 408 of 2024, which created the Enough program, mandated that at least $15 million in general funds be appropriated to the Enough Grant Fund in fiscal 2026. The allowance includes $37.9 million for this purpose, far surpassing the mandated level. Turning now to page 3 in the fiscal 2024 heading, I'd like to mention that the fiscal 25 budget included a deficiency to begin agency operations with 4 positions transferred from the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy and 4 from the Department of Juvenile Services. In addition to personnel costs, the agency also spent $300,000 on a contract with the Children's Funding Project for fiscal mapping and the development of a public, centralized database of all resources available for children, youth, and families as required by Chapter 408. This database must be published by the start of fiscal 2026. At the start of fiscal 25, grant funding associated with the Children's Cabinet Interagency Fund transferred from GOCPP to Governor's Office for Children. GOC also began implementing 5 legislative priorities from Section 21 as listed on pages 3 and 4. 2 of the legislative priorities were grants to Boys and Girls Clubs, and 1 was to increase funding for local management boards to continue pandemic recovery work. There were also 2 $5 million priorities that would revert funding to the Enough Grant Fund instead of to the general fund if not used for their limited purposes in fiscal 2025. One of those $5 million amounts was to be made available to local management boards. The agency reports that this funding was awarded as the Enough Capacity Building Grant. The other $5 million was to be for the public centralized database I described previously. Funds not needed for that database in fiscal 25 may also be spent on Enough grants. Approximately $381,000 of that $5 million will be used on costs associated with the database in fiscal 25. Also during fiscal 25, GOC launched the Enough Grant Program, releasing application guidance on July 1 and providing pre-application technical assistance to applicants in July through September. This initiative is intended to provide a direct investment to support communities that have experienced multi-generational poverty and its consequences. Only certain neighborhoods are eligible for participation, and GOC is responsible for reporting this information to local governments. The eligible neighborhoods will change over time, with funding in the first years of the program focused on neighborhoods with more than 30% of children living in poverty and served by a community school with a concentration of poverty level of at least 80% for fiscal 25 through and 2026. The second condition decreases to 75% in fiscal 2027 through 2029, is set to 60% in 2030, and will be at least 55% after that. For the initial round of grants, 12 jurisdictions had communities eligible to apply for one of 3 tracks. Those are the partnership, planning, and implementation tracks. The initiative's design intends for participants to receive additional public and private funding as their partnership governance and ability to address outcomes in the 4 Enough results areas evolve. The 4 results areas are cradle to career education, healthy families, economically secure families, and safe and thriving communities. In December, GOC awarded 27 recipients a total of $13.1 million in awards. Though the agency has been reestablished for approximately 1 year, it has been able to quickly develop program requirements and regulations, conduct outreach about the program to potential applicants, and award the majority of available funding. It will take additional time for the program's success to be verifiable in the recipient communities. Exhibit 2 on page 7 provides an overview of agency spending in fiscal 26. Approximately 71.5% is dedicated to the ENOUGH program when counting the general and special fund appropriations. Spending on Children's Cabinet Interagency Fund grants and contracts, including funding for local management boards, the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund, and local care team coordinators, will total about 24.3% of the budget. Personnel and operating expenses make up the remaining 4.2%. Exhibit 3 on pages 8 and 9 details the changes in the budget between fiscal years. GOC's personnel expenditures are expected to grow by $1.4 million for the addition of 11 new positions. Most of the growth in the agency's budget comes from spending on the ENOUGH initiative. General fund expenditure increases by approximately $22.9 million. Growth in the budget is offset by the removal of legislative priority spending. The ENOUGH Grant Fund was created by Chapter 408 and may only be used to distribute grants through the ENOUGH program. The working appropriation includes up to $15 million in general funds and $15 million in the special fund expenditures for ENOUGH grantees, excluding the LMBs receiving the ENOUGH LMB capacity building grant. Chapter 408 also established a mandate for the governor to pay at least $15 million into the fund in fiscal 26. No growth from the agency's fiscal 25 budget is required to meet the mandated general fund amount in fiscal 26. The Department of Legislative Services recommends reducing the general fund appropriation for the ENOUGH Grant Fund account by $22.9 million and the special fund authorization by a corresponding amount to provide the mandated funding level in fiscal 26. Another area of general fund expenditure on grants for Governor's Office for Children is providing grants to local management boards through the Children's Cabinet Interagency Fund. The allowance decreases by $750,000 in general funds for grants to LMBs due to the removal of legislative priority spending. Each LMB is expected to receive the same proportion of the total award in the allowance as in the previous fiscal year, as shown in Exhibit 4 on page 11. This exhibit excludes the funding associated with the ENOUGH program in fiscal 25 and 26. In fiscal 26, the Baltimore City's local management board is expected to receive approximately $3.3 million. Chapter 25 of 2019 established a mandated appropriation to the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund through the Baltimore City's LMB. The mandate was set at $3.5 million beginning in fiscal 21. The mandate expired in fiscal 2024. Due to the expiration of the funding mandate, DLS recommends eliminating that $3.5 million general fund appropriation. A chart with information on the agency's personnel is shown at the bottom half of page 12. In the allowance, the agency receives 11 new regular positions, 6 of which will support the ENOUGH program, and the remaining 5 will facilitate the agency's administration of the Children's Cabinet and support the agency's role as a coordinating office. GOC should comment today in its testimony on how the addition of these positions will increase its ability to fulfill its mission. The key observation section begins on page 13. Exhibit 5 on pages 13 and 14 describes the agency's reporting requirements in the current fiscal year through fiscal 2027. I'll highlight some of the ones that I have not already mentioned. GOC must facilitate at least 4 open meetings of the Children's Cabinet annually, publish a report on the ENOUGH program annually, produce a report on neighborhood indicators of poverty by October 1st, 2025, submit the state's 3-year plan for children, youth, and families by December 1st, 2025, and evaluate the ENOUGH program by June 1st, 2027. The second key observation on youth out-of-home placements begins on page 14. The 4 primary agencies that oversee the welfare of children placed outside the home are the Department of Human Services, the Maryland Department of Health, the Department of Juvenile Services, and the Maryland State Department of Education. Language in the fiscal 25 budget restricted funds from the data reporting agencies until GOC submitted the out-of-home placements report. DLS is therefore going to be recommending that funding withheld for those data reporting agencies be released if there are no no objections at the hearing today. The number of youth experiencing at least one out-of-home placement in fiscal '24 declined 5.8% from the fiscal '23 level to 5,730 youth. Exhibit 6 on page 16 details the rate of out-of-home placements per 100,000 youth by jurisdiction. Most jurisdictions had fewer out-of-home placements in fiscal '24 than in '23 or in 2022. The 5,730 youths experienced a combined 12,918 placements in fiscal '24, with nearly half of placements being in the same county of origin. Only 292 youth were placed out of state, including to family homes that are out of state. Exhibit 7 on page 17 shows the number of youths placed out of state between fiscal 2020 and 2024. The population of youths out of state increased by 5% between the two most recent years. However, the fiscal '24 level remains 9.3% lower than in fiscal '21 and 43.4% lower than in fiscal 2020. A slightly larger percentage of children were placed in an out-of-state family home in 2024 compared with 2023 or 2022. Additional placements may be made to family homes in future years. In fiscal '25, Chapter 429 of 2024 went into effect, which expands the definition of kinship caregiver and requires the placement of a child with a kinship caregiver if they are located subsequent to the child's placement in foster care setting, and specifies considerations that must be taken into account when placing a child in an out-of-home care if a kinship caregiver cannot be located. DLS recommends adding a section to the budget bill restricting funds in each of the data contributing agencies pending the submission of the 2025 out-of-home placements report. I skipped over something when discussing the first key observation, which I want to return to. Another reporting expectation for the agency is participation in the annual Managing for Results performance analysis process, and DLS recommends that there's adoption of committee narrative requesting GOC to create detailed agency objectives and performance measures to submit with the proposed, to submit December 1st, 2025. That and the other recommended actions are described in the analysis beginning on page 19, and a summary of JCR responses from the agency can be found on page 22. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee at this time.
Thank you very much. Good job. Any questions? Senator Benson.
Oh, it's okay. How, on page number 16, how is it determined as to which county has students? Do you all have a criteria that you sit to determine whether? I'm noticing that you have a huge number of students from Baltimore City, Garrett County, Allegheny County.
Senator Benson, those are children who are placed outside of the home, so they would be students as they are school aged.
They're placed outside of the home?
Yes, this is data specific to children who require an out-of-home placement. They would also be students, but this reflects the rate of out-of-home placements per jurisdiction.
It's interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Quarterman.
Thank you. Just a quick question for the analysts. I know that the recommendation is to reduce the general fund appropriation, so it's back to the mandated level.
Yes.
Last year, I remember we had a similar conversation kind of as far as what they were proposing. There was a DLS recommendation to cut it back because we weren't sure as far as will they be able to get a certain amount of funding out. I don't have that. I don't remember it. I don't know if you do.
Yes,
what the numbers were last year?
Yeah, I can provide that.
Okay.
Last year, the budget as introduced by the governor included $15 million for the program. DLS had recommended reducing that amount, I believe, by $10 million to $5 million.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
The agency's already been able to get $13.1 million out the door, but the legislature ultimately did not take the DLS recommendation. Instead, they reduced the amount of funding for the ENF program by $5 million to $10 million, and then through legislative priority spending actions, added two $5 million amounts. One of those was meant to be for local management boards.
Which is how they use that.
If they did not spend it on local management boards, it would have reverted to the grant fund and would have remained, and could not have been spent for another purpose in fiscal '25, but would have been available in '26. And then the other $5 million amount was for the database. The agency was able to spend some money in fiscal '24, and they've also spent some of that $5 million in fiscal '25 for the purpose of the database, but that was more money than was required, so they're using the
Yep, I saw that
remaining
too.
for grants.
Okay, no, thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, we have Madeline, no, we have Carmel M. Martin, Special Secretary.
Thank you, Chair King. Good afternoon, Chair King and members of the committee. It's an honor to be here with you today. I am Carmel Martin, Special Secretary for the Governor's Office for Children, and I'm joined today by our Director of the ENOUGH Program, Pickett Slater-Harrington, and our Chief of Staff, Cleo Hirsch. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee as you review the proposed operating budget for the Governor's Office for Children for fiscal year 2026. I also want to thank Madeline Miller, our DLS analyst, for her thoughtful and thorough analysis. As you know, in January of 2024, the governor issued an executive order reestablishing the Governor's Office for Children, the GOC. Since then, in a short amount of time, we have staffed up, established an interagency process through the Children's Cabinet, and launched the ENOUGH Initiative, the governor's strategy for tackling the root causes of child poverty. As the governor has said, the ENOUGH Initiative is not just a bill or a program, it's an approach to governing. The GOC strives to ensure that our work across state government is aligned, effective, and efficient. The themes that you'll see throughout our work and at the heart of the ENOUGH Initiative are data and evidence-based strategy, driven by community needs and voice, and executed through strong cross-sector collaboration and partnership. To tackle child poverty, we need a comprehensive approach. Through the ENOUGH Initiative, we're able to support communities at the neighborhood level to think across sectors and programmatic silos to better leverage existing resources to tackle concentrated intergenerational poverty. We've been mirroring that approach at the county level through our close partnership and work with local management boards, and at the state level through our work across the Children's Cabinet. I'd like to take a moment to highlight a few examples that illustrate GOC's work and impact over the last year. We completed all programmatic requirements of the ENOUGH grant program, including building an eligibility map, notifying all local governments of the neighborhoods eligible to participate in ENOUGH, and identifying the first cohort of grant recipients. 27 grantees have been selected to serve in our inaugural ENOUGH cohort with representation from all regions of the state. The work of these 27 grants will impact 30,000 children living in poverty, and almost 500 organizations will sit on the partnership tables of our neighborhood coalitions. We've developed partnerships with several nonprofit organizations funded with private sector funding through philanthropy to support our work, including the Harlem Children's Zone, Purpose-Built Communities, Partners for Rural Impact, Strive Together, and Baltimore's Promise. Each are providing robust one-on-one coaching and technical assistance to support our communities. We have worked with our colleagues on the Children's Cabinet, local management boards, and the private sector, and stakeholders across the state to address a broad spectrum of issues such as benefits access, food insecurity, and high-quality childcare and education. And inspired by the legislature's commitment, philanthropic and private sector institutions have come together to amplify the state's investment with an initial commitment of $100 million to form the ENOUGH Alliance. Now I would like to turn to our written testimony before you. We would like to begin on page 9. The first recommendation in the DLS analysis is to reduce funds appropriated to the ENOUGH Grant Fund account by $22.9 million. We respectfully disagree. The design of the ENOUGH Act requires increased funding to be successful. GOC built 3 tracks of grants to align with the statute and meet communities at their level of readiness for the complex work contemplated by the ENOUGH program. In the first year, we anticipated that most grantees would need time to develop partnerships and/or conduct community needs assessments and develop neighborhood action plans to address the root causes of child poverty aligned with the ENOUGH statute. Therefore, we provided partnership development, or Track 1, and plan development, or Track 2, grants to get them started. We anticipated that only a small number of communities would be ready for implementation grants, or Track 3, in fiscal year 2025. In this inaugural year, 24 out of 27 grants went to communities to develop cross-sector partnerships and develop neighborhood action plans. However, we anticipate that many of these communities will be ready for implementation in the FY26 year, requiring a higher level of funding in the second year of the program. For example, Identity Inc. is one of our planning grantees. We'll hear from them a little later. Kent Savine is with us. They received $300,000 this year to create a neighborhood strategic plan addressing root causes of poverty in the central Gaithersburg and Montgomery Village community. They will focus on issues including—
That's my neighborhood.
They will focus on issues including but not limited to English literacy, workforce development, affordable housing, and youth social and emotional well-being. United Communities Against Poverty, who we'll also hear from today with Rashid Jameson, who's with us, is another planning grantee in Suitland and District Heights. They will focus on issues including but not limited to housing affordability, food insecurity, and access to mental health and substance use services. As these grantees are ready to move from planning to implementation, they will require more resources from the ENOUGH program. 3 out of the 27 grants went to communities that were ready to implement action plans to reduce child poverty. However, given the need to ramp up activities over time and the 6-month grant period in fiscal year 2025, these 3 communities were given smaller grants in the first year with a plan for larger grants in the second year as they move to fully implement their action plans. For example, Sandmar Community and Family Services in Washington County, represented here today by Keith Fenoy, is beginning to implement their strategic plan focused on critical issues facing their community like mental health and substance use, housing instability, childcare, and economic advancement. And they will need more resources to drive that critical work in the coming year. Without the increase in funding anticipated by the statute, communities with implementation grants will not be able to fulfill the requirements of their current grants, and partnership and planning communities will complete required activities and will not receive funding to take the next step forward in fiscal year 2026. Furthermore, the DLS recommendation would eliminate funding that was given to the local management boards in the last fiscal cycle. And this funding is used in each of Maryland's 24 counties and Baltimore, and they will not be able to continue their critical work building the capacity of high poverty communities within their jurisdictions to design and implement strategies that increase economic mobility and reduce child poverty. Thus, the vision of the ENOUGH Act will not be fulfilled without the requested increase in enough funds this fiscal year. We know we're in a tight fiscal times. However, the state of Maryland invests billions of dollars into anti-poverty work, but our work is often siloed, which minimizes our collective impact. This investment will help unlock the true potential of the state's significant investment in supporting children and families, as well as significant investment from the private sector. This requires a modest but strategic investment at the community level to break down silos and build the capacity of community-based organizations to drive the change they believe are necessary, not only to move families out of poverty, but to create safe and thriving communities that will outlive this initiative. As the governor has pointed out, the rates of concentrated generational poverty in Maryland have looked the same for decades, and they will remain the same if we fail to act. We need to do everything in our power to ensure that another generation of children in Maryland do not lose out on their opportunity to live up to their God-given potential. Next, on page 12, the second recommendation in the DLS analysis is eliminating the $3.5 million general fund appropriation for the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund grant. We respectfully disagree. Baltimore has the largest total number and proportion of Maryland children living in poverty, representing more than 30,000 children. BCYF funds critical programs such as Be More for Healthy Babies, a program that is drastically reducing infant mortality through family and caregiver education, community outreach, training, and media campaigns. Additional details can be found in our written testimony. Next, on page 14, the DLS analysis recommends that GOC submit proposed Managing for Results MFR goals, objectives, and measures with the agency's fiscal 2027 budget. We agree with the committee's request and will ensure the submission of MFR goals, objectives, and measures. Lastly, on page 18, with respect to the requirement to file an out-of-home placement report, we agree to file the out-of-home placement report with the following requested amendment. GOC requests that the one-day counts for out-of-home placement be tied to October 15th instead of January 1st. Additional details can be found in our written testimony. This concludes our testimony. Thank you again for this opportunity, and we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I'm just so happy to see the Governor's Office for Children functioning. You know, I've been here long enough where we've had it and we haven't had it and we called it something else, and I'm really happy to see it back to being the Governor's Office for Children and functioning, so it's good to hear.
Well, and thank you, Chair, for your career of leadership in supporting children in Maryland. We really appreciate your support, but are very honored to be before you, given your long history on these issues.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Do we have any comments from anybody? I don't think so, so you're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a few people here to give some testimony. Kent Sovine, Rashida Jameson. I think that's, Brian Alston. I think that's all we have. Let's speak. That's it. Okay. Yeah, that's her, Rashida. Do you want to come on up to the table?
And Chair, I think we have two additional folks as well.
That's fine. That's fine. They can come on up. Okay, whoever wants to start. I guess in order, Kate.
Hello, good day, Madam Chair, Woman King, Senator Quarterman, and Senator Benson. Thank you all for having us today. So, of course, we're in the pilot phase of the Enough Grant, the Enough Act, but wanted to just keep it short and simple as I've been working with our community stakeholders as we are in the implementation, or as we are in the strategic planning phase. One thing that I've learned since we've been working with our roundtable, that in order to infuse change in our varying communities, we must take the steps to do something different, like working with our local community schools that have an 88% or higher poverty rate. The Enough Act puts community stakeholders in the driving position to move our communities forward, starting with our most vital asset, our children. For far too long, the pockets of need in our communities exist in an invisible state. And now, the time has come for enough to be enough, and we must act. So on behalf of Prince George's County's Community Action Agency, United Communities Against Poverty, I thank you all for your time today.
Go next. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senator Benson, good to see you. My name is Brian Alston, State Circle Strategies, here on behalf of Park Heights Renaissance, PHR. We are here in strong support of the Governor's Office for Children, and we ask that you fully support their request. I'm here to speak specifically about the Enough grant. There are approximately 20,000 residents in Park Heights, and the grant will allow us to turbocharge long overdue community development priorities. We are honored to be part of the first cohort of this initiative. The funds will allow PHR to continue the work we've already started, rebuilding our communities brick by brick, ensuring that every child and family has resources needed to thrive. And we are focused on the pillars of strong community, education, health, and economically securing families, and of course, safe and thriving neighborhoods. I know our time is short, so again, we invite you all to come out and see the transformational work that is happening. We are thankful to the General Assembly, and we ask for your continued support. And we thank Special Secretary Martin for her leadership, as well as Governor Moore for his vision to leave no child and no community behind. Thank you for your consideration of my testimony, and we ask for a favorable support of this initiative request.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
Hello, my name's Kent Sovine. I will go next. We have a wonderful partnership with Identity, but I'm with Cheer.
Okay.
It was we work with them, and we are in the lower part of Montgomery County, but we love Identity. We partner with them a lot. So again, my name is Kent Sovine, Executive Director of Cheer. Cheer means Community Health and Empowerment through Education and Research. And we are part of the Track 2, the neighborhood planning part of the Enough grant. Long Branch is a diverse, largely immigrant community with about 25,000 residents from nearly 50 countries. This community is served by 2 Title I schools, elementary schools, that have over 80% students receiving free and reduced meals. This grant has built a lot of excitement with over 20 partners joining our efforts, including the Montgomery County Department of Recreation and Health and Human Services, as well as local area nonprofits and community leaders. Each week, we see more local organizations reaching out to us to join the Long Branch Thrives team, and we expect this to continue to grow. As Long Branch residents hear more about what's going on here, there is a buzz of enthusiasm throughout the community to join our efforts during these times of uncertainty. The comprehensive place-based approach that Cheer uses is community-driven, with residents' voices at the center of setting their vision for a thriving community. Throughout the creation of an action plan, we are bringing residents, community service providers, schools, local governments, and others to fulfill the shared goals to improve the different results categories of the Enough grant. For the past 15 years, Cheer has worked in partnership with the community we serve and look forward to continuing nurturing our collective efforts and vision for the future. We thank Governor Wes Moore and the Governor's Office of Children for this opportunity and for understanding that neighbors and neighborhoods are the foundation for meaningful change. We ask for continued funding for this groundbreaking program.
Thank you.
Hi, Chair King, and good afternoon, Senator Benson and our friends, Senator Quarterman from Washington County. My name is Keith Fanjoy. I'm the CEO of Sanmar Family and Community Services in Western Maryland. I'm very thankful to be here today, and I'm also very aware of the fiduciary responsibility of this committee. I've spent the last 20 years as a social worker on the front lines, initially in Baltimore City and then for 19 years at Sanmar. And I believe the Enough Act is the first.
Can I get you to speak it right into that microphone so we can hear you better?
Okay.
Thank you.
I believe that the Enough Act is the first real opportunity for transformation to move families from surviving to thriving. For more than a decade, we have been able to do a great deal of positive progress for families with very little dollars. And that hasn't stopped us from solving hard problems, but it does slow us down from addressing the root causes that families are experiencing. As a part of our Bester Community of Hope initiative in Hagerstown, we see ongoing challenges for children like housing and homelessness, substance use and mental health issues, childcare options, workforce development for a living wage, and many symptoms related to poverty. The new investment from private philanthropy and commitments from agencies just like ours, and we have put it all on the line. Our agency has gone all in on this initiative, we need government to also have the same type of stake in our community. We also can't abandon those in crisis, but by the grace of God, we are so privileged not to be in their shoes for those circumstances. This is about a balanced approach, and our vision for the future of South Hagerstown is crystal clear. New spaces and revitalized homes for the residents that are already in that community. The working poor having opportunities for training and better jobs to help their family. And in closing, I'll say, you know, if we believe in economic development, if we believe in the power of opportunity and that kind of progress in places just like downtown Hagerstown, where we've done amazing things through leadership, just like Senator Quarterman for things like Meredith Park, we also have to share in that same belief in families and investing in families. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Ryan Turner, proudly representing Baltimore's Promise. We are a nonprofit intermediary that harnesses the power of data and convenes partners at community and systems level to support positive life outcomes for children and youth from 0 to 24. Essentially, we center the power and expertise of the people while grounding ourselves in actionable data that accelerates progress in places that need it the most. And I will tell you that the Enough initiative, which has been informed by many folks who specialize in collective impact and community organizing, aligns deeply with Baltimore's Promise. Just a couple of things that I believe that the Enough initiative centers and honors. One is the fact that it honors the fact that most people, the people who are proximate to challenges, are proximate to the solutions. And so it sets a container for effective coordination, collaboration, and partnership within place. The second thing that the Enough initiative honors is the fact that some of the most sustainable solutions won't thrive with a one-size-fits-all approach. And organizations just like Baltimore's Promise will be leveraging data in order to understand the nuances in place. This kind of thoughtful focus and strategy not only builds upon the place-based strategies and data-informed work like organizations like Baltimore's Promise, but it requires intentional investments to scale and ensure that all children and communities can benefit from these innovative approaches. Since the passage of the Enough Act, the initial investment, $100 million has been leveraged. And I'll move forward because I know that I'm running out of time. But I'll finally just say that in a time when marginalized communities across the country are being faced with grave uncertainty, Maryland right now has the opportunity to innovate in the face of inequity. And so I urge you to support Governor Moore's proposed budget, the Governor's Office of Children, and particularly funding the Enough initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, that ends it for us today, committee.